During the Cold War, survival depended on one thing above all else: early detection. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a permanent state of suspicion. Both sides believed that the next war, if it came, would begin without warning and escalate faster than any conflict in history. Nuclear weapons made reaction time a matter of minutes. Whoever detected the enemy first would have the advantage. Whoever failed to detect them might not survive at all. This fear shaped military strategy for decades. By the 1950s and 1960s, radar had become the backbone of national defense. Vast networks of radar stations stretched across continents, scanning the skies day and night. In the Soviet Union, these systems were seen as an invisible shield, a technological wall that could not be bypassed. Every aircraft, every missile, every object moving through the air was expected to leave a detectable signature. The logic seemed absolute. If something flew, it could be seen. Detection meant warning, warning meant time, and time meant survival. As a result, both superpowers invested enormous resources into improving radar technology. Systems became more powerful, more precise, and more interconnected. Radar operators were trained to identify patterns, distinguish threats, and respond instantly. Military planners believed that airspace had become transparent, a space where nothing could move without being noticed. This belief shaped aircraft design itself. Fighter jets and bombers were built for speed, altitude, and payload. The assumption was simple: you could outrun detection, but you could not escape it. Stealth, as a concept, barely existed. Being seen was unavoidable. The only question was how fast you could strike before being intercepted. In this environment, detection was not just a technical function. It became a psychological foundation of security. Knowing that the enemy could be seen created confidence. It allowed leaders to believe they had control over escalation. It allowed populations to believe they were protected. For years, radar was treated as an infallible technology. Military planners in both the United States and the Soviet Union believed that radar coverage had made surprise attack impossible. Airspace was mapped, monitored, and controlled. Any hostile aircraft entering defended territory would be detected, tracked, and intercepted long before reaching its target. But this confidence masked a critical vulnerability. Radar was treated as a law of nature, not a system with weaknesses. Behind the scenes, however, a quiet realization was beginning to take shape. Engineers understood that radar did not see objects the way the human eye does. It detected reflected energy. Radar signals were emitted, traveled through the air, struck an object, and bounced back toward the receiver. The strength and clarity of that return signal depended on how much energy was reflected back, not simply on the object's presence. This distinction mattered. Engineers began to understand that certain shapes reflected radar energy poorly. Flat surfaces angled away from the radar source could deflect signals rather than return them. Curved forms could scatter energy in unpredictable directions. Materials could absorb portions of the radar wave, reducing the strength of the return. In other words, radar did not detect objects. It detected reflections. This detail was largely academic at first. It did not challenge the dominant belief that detection was inevitable. Aircraft designers remained focused on speed, altitude, and maneuverability. The prevailing belief was that any meaningful reduction in radar visibility would come at unacceptable performance costs. Stealth was not part of the design vocabulary. The idea that an aircraft could avoid detection seemed closer to theory than reality. Yet small experiments began to challenge that assumption. Mathematical models showed that an aircraft's radar cross-section, the measure of how visible it appeared to radar, could vary dramatically based on geometry alone. Two objects of similar size could appear radically different to a radar system, depending entirely on how their surfaces interacted with incoming waves. This insight quietly undermined decades of strategic certainty. If radar visibility could be reduced significantly, early warning systems could be delayed. Interception windows could shrink, defensive reactions could fail altogether. The implications were enormous. For the Soviet Union, whose air defense doctrine relied heavily on layered radar detection, this vulnerability was existential. The entire defensive architecture assumed that detection was guaranteed. For the United States, the flaw represented opportunity. If an aircraft could penetrate defended airspace without being detected, or detected too late, it could bypass the strongest air defenses in the world. Strategic bombing, reconnaissance, and nuclear deterrence would be transformed. At the height of the Cold War, when both sides believed the skies were fully visible, the most dangerous possibility was not a new weapon or a faster aircraft. It was the idea that something could fly and not be seen at all. The concept remained confined to research papers and classified discussions. No operational aircraft had yet demonstrated such capabilities. To most observers, invisibility in the sky still sounded like science fiction. But the flaw had been identified. And once a flaw is understood, it becomes only a matter of time before someone learns how to exploit it. That moment was approaching. During the Cold War, survival depended on one thing above all else: early detection. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a permanent state of suspicion. Both sides believed that the next war, if it came, would begin without warning and escalate faster than any conflict in history. Nuclear weapons made reaction time a matter of minutes. Whoever detected the enemy first would have the advantage. Whoever failed to detect them might not survive at all. This fear shaped military strategy for decades. By the 1950s and 1960s, radar had become the backbone of national defense. Vast networks of radar stations stretched across continents, scanning the skies day and night. In the Soviet Union, these systems were seen as an invisible shield, a technological wall that could not be bypassed. Every aircraft, every missile, every object moving through the air was expected to leave a detectable signature. The logic seemed absolute. If something flew, it could be seen. Detection meant warning, warning meant time, and time meant survival. As a result, both superpowers invested enormous resources into improving radar technology. Systems became more powerful, more precise, and more interconnected. Radar operators were trained to identify patterns, distinguish threats, and respond instantly. Military planners believed that airspace had become transparent, a space where nothing could move without being noticed. This belief shaped aircraft design itself. Fighter jets and bombers were built for speed, altitude, and payload. The assumption was simple: you could outrun detection, but you could not escape it. Stealth, as a concept, barely existed. Being seen was unavoidable. The only question was how fast you could strike before being intercepted. In this environment, detection was not just a technical function. It became a psychological foundation of security. Knowing that the enemy could be seen created confidence. It allowed leaders to believe they had control over escalation. It allowed populations to believe they were protected. For years, radar was treated as an infallible technology. Military planners in both the United States and the Soviet Union believed that radar coverage had made surprise attack impossible. Airspace was mapped, monitored, and controlled. Any hostile aircraft entering defended territory would be detected, tracked, and intercepted long before reaching its target. But this confidence masked a critical vulnerability. Radar was treated as a law of nature, not a system with weaknesses. Behind the scenes, however, a quiet realization was beginning to take shape. Engineers understood that radar did not see objects the way the human eye does. It detected reflected energy. Radar signals were emitted, traveled through the air, struck an object, and bounced back toward the receiver. The strength and clarity of that return signal depended on how much energy was reflected back, not simply on the object's presence. This distinction mattered. The breakthrough that made stealth technology possible did not come from a secret laboratory in the United States. It came from mathematics. In the early 1960s, a Soviet physicist named Pyotr Ufimtsev published a series of papers on the behavior of electromagnetic waves. His research focused on how radar signals interacted with objects, how waves were reflected, scattered, or absorbed depending on surface geometry. At the time, Ufimtsev's work attracted little attention inside the Soviet military. The mathematics was complex, abstract, and disconnected from immediate weapons development. Soviet defense planners were focused on improving radar strength and coverage, not questioning its fundamental assumptions. The idea that aircraft visibility could be drastically reduced through shape alone seemed impractical, if not irrelevant. Ironically, this overlooked research would later reshape modern warfare. Ufimtsev demonstrated that an object's radar signature was not determined by its size, but by how its surfaces interacted with incoming radar waves. Sharp edges, flat planes, and specific angles could deflect energy away from the radar receiver, drastically reducing the signal that returned. This meant that an aircraft did not need to outrun radar. It could confuse it. To most engineers, the concept remained theoretical. The calculations were demanding, requiring extensive computation. Designing an aircraft around such principles would sacrifice aerodynamics, speed, and maneuverability. In the 1960s, the technology needed to make such designs practical did not yet exist. As a result, the Soviet Union filed Ufimtsev's work away. The United States did not. Because Ufimtsev's papers were published openly, they became accessible to Western researchers. In the 1970s, American engineers revisited the math with fresh perspective and with access to increasingly powerful computers. What once seemed impractical now appeared achievable. Using Ufimtsev's equations, U.S. defense researchers began modeling aircraft shapes that minimized radar reflection. Early designs looked strange and angular, prioritizing radar invisibility over conventional performance. These shapes would never have been considered viable in previous decades. But something remarkable emerged from the simulations. The radar returns were dramatically lower. For the first time, engineers could quantify invisibility. Radar cross-section was no longer an abstract concept. It was a measurable design parameter. Invisibility became something that could be engineered, not imagined. This shift transformed stealth from theory into possibility. The implications were profound. If radar visibility could be reduced by orders of magnitude, detection would be delayed or fail entirely. Air defense systems built around early warning and interception would be rendered ineffective. Entire strategic doctrines, especially those of the Soviet Union, were suddenly vulnerable. What made this moment especially significant was its asymmetry. The Soviet Union had produced the theory. The United States had recognized its value. And now the United States was moving toward implementation. Stealth was no longer science fiction. It was becoming an engineering problem, one that could be solved. In the shadows of the Cold War, a quiet revolution was taking place, not with missiles or armies, but with equations, simulations, and classified design programs. Turning mathematical theory into a flying machine, however, required more than engineering skill. It required secrecy. By the mid-1970s, the United States had reached a quiet conclusion. If stealth was possible, it had to be developed beyond the reach of public scrutiny, political debate, and even much of the military itself. The technology threatened to upend decades of strategic assumptions. If revealed too early, it could trigger countermeasures before it ever became operational. The solution was the Black Project. Responsibility for turning stealth theory into reality fell to a small group of engineers within Lockheed's Advanced Development Division, known as Skunk Works. This team had already built some of the most unconventional aircraft in history. Now they were asked to do something unprecedented, design an aircraft that prioritized invisibility over every traditional measure of performance. The early designs were radical. Using Yefimsev's equations, engineers created shapes composed almost entirely of flat, angled surfaces. These facets were not aesthetic choices. They were mathematical necessities. Each surface was oriented to deflect radar waves away from their source, preventing energy from returning to enemy receivers. The result looked nothing like a conventional aircraft. It was slow, it was unstable, it lacked the smooth curves associated with efficient flight. In fact, by traditional aerodynamic standards, it should not have flown at all. But computers changed everything. Advances in digital flight control systems allowed inherently unstable designs to remain controllable. What a human pilot could not manage, computers could correct in real time. This marriage of stealth geometry and computerized control made the impossible possible. Secrecy surrounded every stage of development. Engineers worked in isolated facilities. Projects were compartmentalized. Even test pilots were given limited information. Official budgets concealed the program under vague line items. To the outside world, nothing was happening. Inside, everything was changing. The first stealth prototype, later known as the Have Blue program, began flight testing in the late 1970s. The goal was simple: prove that radar invisibility worked in the real world, not just in simulations. The results exceeded expectations. Radar systems that easily tracked conventional aircraft struggled to detect the prototype. In some cases, the aircraft appeared intermittently or not at all. The concept that had once seemed theoretical now had empirical proof. Stealth worked. This success cleared the path for an operational aircraft. The result was the F-117 Nighthawk, the world's first stealth attack aircraft. Officially acknowledged only years after its development, the F-117 embodied a new philosophy of warfare. It was not designed to dominate air combat. It was designed to penetrate the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and strike targets that had previously been unreachable. From the outside, the aircraft looked almost unreal. Sharp angles, black surfaces, a silhouette that defied expectation. But its true power was invisible. Radar operators could not rely on their screens. Air defense systems could not respond in time. What had once been the backbone of national defense became unreliable. What made this development especially destabilizing was that it occurred in silence. For years, the Soviet Union had no clear indication that such a capability existed. Their radar systems continued to operate under assumptions that no longer held. Defensive confidence remained high, but it was now based on outdated reality. By the time stealth aircraft entered operational service, the strategic balance had already shifted. The equations had become machines. The machines had entered the sky, and the world had changed without realizing it. The final shock would come not from the aircraft themselves, but from the moment they were finally revealed, when invisibility stopped being a theory and became a geopolitical fact. For most of the Cold War, the Soviet Union believed it understood the rules of aerial warfare. Aircraft could be detected, airspace could be defended, surprise could be managed. Those beliefs collapsed quietly, and then all at once. By the late 1980s, fragments of information began to reach Soviet intelligence. Reports described aircraft with unusual angular shapes. Radar operators noted inconsistent or disappearing returns. Western air operations appeared to penetrate heavily defended airspace with losses that seemed implausibly low. Individually, these anomalies could be dismissed as coincidence, error, or exaggeration. Taken together, they pointed to a deeply unsettling conclusion. The rules had changed. The confirmation came in 1991, during the Gulf War. For the first time, the United States openly deployed stealth aircraft in a large-scale conflict. F-117 Nighthawks flew directly into the heart of enemy air defense networks, striking command centers, airfields, and critical infrastructure with precision. often during the opening hours of the campaign. Radar systems failed to provide timely warning. Interceptors were launched too late, or not at all. For military observers around the world, including those in Moscow, the implications were unmistakable. This was not an incremental improvement in aircraft design. It was a strategic rupture. Soviet air defense doctrine had been built on the assumption that detection was guaranteed. Early warning would trigger layered responses. Time would always exist between detection and impact. Stealth shattered that sequence. Detection was delayed or degraded. Reaction windows collapsed. Systems refined over decades proved unreliable against an aircraft designed not to fight defenses, but to bypass them entirely. The irony was difficult to ignore. A Soviet physicist had identified the mathematical vulnerability. The United States had operationalized it. By the time the threat became undeniable, it was already embedded in Western military doctrine. Inside the Soviet military establishment, stealth triggered urgent reassessment. Radar frequencies were reconsidered, new sensor concepts were explored. Counter-stealth research accelerated. But the challenge was structural. Stealth was not a single technology that could be copied or neutralized quickly. It was an integrated system, combining geometry, materials, science, computing power, operational planning, and strategic intent. More importantly, it shifted initiative. Stealth aircraft forced defenders to react blindly, often too late. In warfare, the side that dictates reaction controls tempo. Stealth restored the element of surprise in an era that had assumed surprise was obsolete. By the time the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, stealth was no longer experimental. It was foundational. New generations of stealth aircraft were already under development. The technological gap was not closing, it was widening. What ultimately unsettled Soviet planners was not invisibility alone. It was what invisibility represented. A future in which detection could no longer be assumed. A battlefield where warning systems might fail silently. A world where the first indication of attack could be the impact itself. Stealth did not end the Cold War, but it reshaped how power was measured in its final years, and how warfare would be understood in the decades that followed. In the modern era, nations still build radars, missiles, and defenses, but the lesson endures. The most dangerous weapon is not always the one that strikes hardest. Sometimes it is the one you never see coming.